Welcome to The Happy Brain, the podcast that answers your questions about the happy brain chemicals, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphin. Hi, I'm Loretta Breuning, founder of the Inner Mammal Institute and author of Habits of a Happy Brain, Retrain Your Brain to Boost Your Serotonin, Dopamine, Oxytocin, and Endorphin Levels. I hope you enjoy our show today, and if it raises any questions in your mind, feel free to send them to me, either through the contact form at the Inner Mammal Institute, which is innermammalinstitute.org, or contact me on Facebook, and you're invited to enjoy our Facebook discussion group with the Inner Mammal Institute, or my daily Facebook message on Loretta Breuning PhD page. Now, enjoy the show. So let's talk about self-soothing habits. So first, everybody needs self-soothing habits because it's not easy to soothe this brain we've inherited. Our brain easily goes negative for many reasons. One is because we evolved to respond to threats in a world full of threats. So our brain is very good at seeing threats and turning on the full emergency alert. The second reason it's so hard to soothe ourselves is because every brain wires itself up in childhood. So we all go through adult life with a brain wired up in childhood, and maybe people think it shouldn't be that way. But the simple explanation that I show in all my books is that animals only get to be children for a few days or weeks or months. Or, chimpanzees get to be children for a few years. That's the longest childhood in the state of nature. And humans get to be children for 18 years. We have 18 whole years to build up our brains. So we build this complex neural network in that time. And then we leave home and we have this illusion that we've just deleted all the garbage that we learned and we've reinvented ourselves. But it's so not true. We're basically running on the neural pathways that we built when we were young. And we're conscious of those pathways with certain aspects of our life. But with our emotional responses, we're not conscious of those pathways, but they control our happy chemicals and our unhappy chemicals. Now, one other reason that self-soothing is difficult is because our happy chemicals are not designed to be on all the time. They are only designed to go on in short spurts, and then they turn off, and then you're like, well, now what? And so it takes a lot of skill to sort of address that now what moment. And so we all address it with habits, and we basically address it with the habit we learned when we were young, because that built a superhighway in our brain, and that's what we go to easily. So the answer in all of my work is that we can build new highways for new self-soothing habits, but it's hard. And so I'll explain. First, I'll give you a chance to talk, and then I'll explain what it takes to build a new self-soothing habit.
Okay. So I'm taking from that, if people had a habit from a young age of, I don't know, I'm thinking more of when someone cries and they're given sugar, or,
Yes,
it's setting up those habits already in place, and maybe you replace the sugar with alcohol, or if you're upset. But is it the same sort of thing? So you just reach for the same crutch?
yes, exactly. And, you don't have to call it a crutch. And we can think that, often it's in addition to the one habit that a person is having a problem with. You could take a broader view and say, well, we have a lot of self-soothing habits. So one person says, I'm going to have a wild weekend. And another person says, I'm going to shut my door and just do my own thing at home for the weekend. One person says, I'm going to call everybody and tell them about my troubles. And another person says, I don't want to hear other people's troubles. So it's a complex web, and I'm not saying one is better than another. So the idea of my work is we get to design what works for us.
And is it usually learned behavior? So is that a pattern that usually comes down from the parents, or
Okay, it's
No.
learned in two ways. One is mirror neurons, where you learn what works for the people around you, which includes anyone that you were exposed to repeatedly, especially under age 8 and during puberty. So during puberty, it widens up and includes your peers and anyone else that you had particular exposure to. But the other big thing is our brain learns from what works. So anytime you had this moment that's like, wow, that worked, that's what built your superhighways. So a simple example would be, the famous example is like if a kid gets to be in a talent show and got a big round of applause and never got any recognition before, and then you're like obsessed with, I have to get more of that. So another example would be if you're feeling bad about something and you go to a party and you forget the thing you were feeling bad about. And then you're like, wow, that worked, because your brain is designed to like focus on predators. And when you're worried about something, it's as if there's a predator. And when you go to the party, you stop thinking about the predator. So that worked from your brain's perspective. So
Okay.
one person may go to a party, another person may play a video game, another person may study math,
And I suppose
whatever
you're not
works.
aware of it. You're not aware of it when you're actually doing that. It's
Exactly.
recognizing what is it that you keep doing and
Exactly.
finding out where that came from.
Yes. Yes. And then knowing that you have power to build new circuits,
The
but it's
change.
hard, yes, to change, but it's hard to build new circuits. One reason is it's just hard to build a new road, but the other is it's so tempting to use the old road and you don't even know you're using it. So the more you know how your brain works, the more you can redirect your energy from the old road to the new road.
Oh, wow, it's really interesting. So for people who, I mean, a lot of people on the page, they just want to cut down, they want to cut out the mindless drinking, or they want to be able to control the drinking. It's not, everyone isn't wanting to totally stop forever. So I suppose this would be interesting when people are triggered maybe to have a drink because they feel stressed or
Okay.
because it's a habit.
Okay, so let's say if a person says, I want to have a new self soothing habit, and you can build a few new self soothing habits. So one of them could be my first response when I'm stressed. What do I want to do? And my second one would be if I have this idea that I want to be able to have one drink at an event, what would be my self-soothing response after that one drink? So we can build a variety of self-soothing responses, but all with the knowledge that each one of them, it takes effort. So I can explain the effort. So a simple way to think about it is it's as hard as learning a foreign language
Oh,
because when I speak my native language, I wasn't born knowing my native language. I'm using neural pathways that got built up big when I was young. And if you spend time around a little toddler, you realize how much repetition and effort goes into learning a language. So that's how much effort it took to build your old self soothing habit. So if you want to build a new one, you have to design it and then repeat it a lot, just like it takes to build a new foreign language, to learn a new foreign language. It's hard to build a foreign language, and yet people do it every day. So you can do
okay.
it if you focus on that step and repeat it. So what is the step? So let's say I feel stressed because of a situation at work. And what am I going to do? So let's say in the past, my first reaction was, I'm just going to do nothing until I have a chance to drink. And then I'm going to just drink in my usual way, which for one person is this and for another person is that. So let's say that's the old habit. So the new habit is going to be, let's say, for example, my first response when I'm frustrated with a situation at work is first to give myself 3 minutes of free time where I'm going to say, first, I'm going to say, this person is on my nerves. I can feel good in the world without this person's approval. I have a natural need for recognition, and I'm not going to see that person as the gatekeeper and to believe that I can't get recognition and rewards in life without that person's approval. I'm not going to allow myself to see that person as the gatekeeper of my rewards in life. And then I'm going to follow that up with like a few minutes of personal reward. So my example would be, what can I do at work? This is what I always use is go to the staircase and listen to comedy recordings while you walk up and down the stairs for 5 minutes. So that would be an example of a self-soothing practice that anyone can have. And that will lower your stress level, especially if you repeat it, so that the alcohol won't be like your only resort. Okay?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so it's a case of just people being aware that of what they do, I suppose, is the first step, isn't it? It's self-awareness.
Yes, and the way to be aware, and the reason it's hard, so the electricity in your brain flows like water in a storm. When you see water in a storm, it just flows into the path of least resistance. And when you have the world coming in through your senses, it just flows into the biggest paths you have. So if I want to be happy, think about if I'm driving to that destination, I have to drive on the roads I have. I can't just drive across, the countryside and go through houses and fences and things. Um, so I can build a new path, but think of how much work it takes to build a new road. So it takes constant
Time.
effort. And then even if you slash a new trail in the jungle, you could think that your brain is a jungle of neurons and you have billions of extra neurons to build new pathways. But when you carve a trail in the jungle, it's a lot of work. So you're tempted to take the old road. And even when you carve a new trail, it grows over by the next day. So you have to work through it again. But if
Mm-hmm.
you carve the same trail every day, then a path establishes. But you still need the maturity to take that small little path instead of coasting down the old highway, but you can do it. And doing what I said is not as much fun immediately, but in the long run, you will be thrilled because you'd say, wow, I have power over my brain. I can create another new path and another and another.
And eventually that way will become the natural way.
Yes.
What sort of time scale do you think then that would take? What do you normally put a time scale on this sort of thing? How long it would take to develop a new pathway?
Um, I say 45 days in my book. It's called Habits of a Happy Brain, Retrain Your Brain to Boost Your Serotonin, Dopamine, Oxytocin, and Endorphin. So if you do the same behavior every day for 45 days, and if you miss a day, start over so you do 45 days in a row. And it won't feel good at first, but after 45 days, it will just feel like, oh, well, this is what I do. And a simple example, you might want to start with a simple one so it doesn't feel all judgy-wudgy. So let's use hypothetically flossing your teeth. So if you hate to floss your teeth and you flossed your teeth for 45 days in a row, then it would just start to feel natural. It doesn't have to be fun. It just feels like, oh, it's no problem. And then when you floss your teeth, you relieve your anxiety about gum disease. And also, it was hard for me to floss my teeth. I realized it was just the motion was so hard to get. And after 45 days, the motion is so automatic that I don't even have to think about it. And then I don't get stuck. I can do it correctly. So it becomes automatic because neurons connect. And that's what controls most of our behavior.
So, what would your take be if someone comes home from work every day, sorts the kids out, then pours a glass of wine? we sometimes suggest that they could use the glass and use just a sparkling, fruit juice or something to replace the alcohol, but you're still going through the
Yes.
ceremony of
Yes.
pouring the wine, sitting down, but you're pouring, obviously not wine, you're pouring juice. Would you think that's okay, or would you suggest to
Oh,
do
yeah.
something completely different?
Oh, no, that sounds great to me. So the idea is always if you can build a new pathway onto a highway that you already have, sometimes that helps. But you have to build the exit ramp between the old highway and the new one. So if you have the bottle of wine and you're about to reach for it, or if you're in the store and you're about, so you have to, like, what do I do in that moment to exit from the old pathway? So you need a plan for that. And another thing I would do is to make the new behavior as much fun as possible. So if you have any juice that you consider a special treat, so focus on that.
Okay. And what about just another thing I know that is a popular complaint when people quit the wine, obviously their body is craving sugar. So they replace that habit with taking chocolate, but then they still have that habit that they then also have to change further down the line. So we'll always say for the first few weeks, just do whatever it takes to not drink the wine. But then are they going to be stuck with this new habit to break? But is it the lesser of two evils? What would you
Yes,
suggest with
yes,
breaking it in the
yes.
first place? Or is that kind of a gradual
So
process?
I agree with the second, the gradual approach. And what's important is to understand the thought process. It's the moment that you reach for that self-soothing habit because you've had a certain thought that triggers that action. And it's hard for people to go back and recapture and redirect that process. And it's easier to do when you're not having alcohol. So even with the sugar, you're closer, having a candy or whatever. Some people, I just heard this funny one. He said, when you have a candy bar, throw away the first bite because it's too hard to throw away the last bite. So throw away the first bite for a week. Then for the second week, throw away the first two bites. Then the third week. So just, and it's wasteful. But anyway, so that's an example. But to me, what's real important is what was I thinking that moment that I said, I gotta have a candy bar? And I know that addicts will often say, it's everything. It's when I have a good feel, it's when I'm happy, when it's unhappy, but still there's a pattern. And I explain in my book, the simple pattern is when my happy chemicals are flowing, that moment ends because our happy chemicals get metabolized. They're not designed to flow effortlessly all the time. And that moment when my happy chemical stops and I feel a droop, and everyone goes through this, there's nothing wrong with you. It's not a disease, despite what the medical profession may make you think. So what happens when I have that droop? I need a toolbox of other ways to give myself good feelings by understanding them better. And if you only have that one way to give yourself a good feeling, it's just a learned skill. You can learn more ways instead of feeling, often it's when I feel hopeless, like I'm never going to get X, so I may as well give myself Y. And if you could track down back to your hopeless feeling, and then you could say, oh, I decided it was hopeless when I was this age because of this reason. And now I have new powers that I didn't have then. So I'm going to build new positive expectations.
I believe that's quite going to be hard for people because, especially if they're drinking every day, it takes a good, well, I would say it takes at least a month before you start to actually think clearly. So I think it's such a hard process to do. But I
That's why
suppose
I
if
said, yeah, like you said, go
yeah,
with the other, if a person wants to get another form of
to
sugar.
chocolate or something,
Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense. Or as well, I mean, do you suggest maybe writing a journal? Because I really advocate that, because it helps you to monitor your feelings, and there's sometimes a pattern to, you know, what it is that's making you
So
reach, because you might not
here's
always
my
know.
idea. We need some positive expectations to stimulate dopamine. Much of the counseling profession is focusing you on trauma and negativity and disappointment and frustration, and they're just deepening your negative pathways. I have another book called The Science of Positivity: Stop Negative Thought Patterns by Changing Your Brain Chemistry. I don't know if you could see it because of the sun. Uh, and here's Habits of a Happy Brain. And then I have another one called Tame Your Anxiety, Rewiring Your Brain for Happiness. So as long as you're focusing on your negative thoughts, you're just going to have more negative thoughts, and you're going to reinforce the idea that you're a victim and you deserve your your
Wow.
substance of abuse. Instead, you need positive expectations. And I don't mean I'm going to be a rock star, I'm going to change the world, but I mean small, realistic expectations. And you may have a social network that has negative expectations that reinforces your addiction. And so instead, you have to sort of distance yourself. If they think, who are you to have positive expectations? Why do you think you're so special? Then that's what my second book is about, The Science of Positivity. You don't need their approval to be positive. It's something
Yeah.
each individual has the power and the choice to do in their own brain. And instead of waiting for this fantasy world where everyone is positive, just do it yourself. Like, just give yourself permission to have positive expectations, to take positive steps and feel good about it. And what I say is, find a positive step you could take before lunch and feel good about it. And then find another positive step you could take before dinner and feel good about that. And I don't mean rescuing orphans from burning buildings. I mean a positive step that you can feel good about your life and your prospects, and take constant small steps, because that's what it takes to stimulate your happy chemicals. You get
So
a
give us
little,
an example. Give us an example of a small positive step then. Just, I think,
yes,
being outside in the fresh air, or
I'll give you.
arranging to meet a friend.
Well, that's fine if it works. But let's say that on a certain day, it's like, yeah, I've been out in the fresh air before. It's not going to work. And I meet a friend and they just make me want to have a drink, because, friends get together and they just talk about their problems. So I'll give you a funny example I had. I had this drawer and I couldn't close it, my underwear drawer, basically. And it had, well, it was also my sock drawer. And it had these socks that I hadn't worn in 10 years. But every time I thought about going through my sock drawer, I would pick up the first sock and I'd say, why haven't I used that in 10 years? Am I going to use it again? And I would sort of get worries about my future and my athletic
Really?
ability, your athletic ability. And then
Really?
I would get so upset that I couldn't do anything about it. So I decided to set a timer for 10 minutes. And in 10 minutes, I'm going to just make whatever decisions I could make in 10 minutes. And that was enough to close the drawer. So I didn't have that suffering every single day of not being able to close the door. And I felt so good after those 10 minutes that I said, that's what I'm going to do every time I have a problem. I'm going to set a timer for 10 minutes and just make difficult decisions for 10 minutes, and then give myself a reward after. And then after a while, I didn't need the reward and I didn't even need the timer.
That's brilliant. That reminds me of when we spoke last week about the banana. Please, can you go into that about you have to get your own banana. So you've got to sort out your sock drawer and get your own banana.
Okay. So most of my work is based on evolutionary psychology, but it's not the evolutionary psychology you hear today, which is all based on the false idea that animals are empathetic and cooperative, and trying to indoctrinate you into a communal mindset that tells you that it's not okay to focus on your own needs and happiness comes from focusing on the needs of others. But in the 20th century, there was a whole century of research on animal behavior and animal brains that showed that the real behavior of animals. So they're very competitive to the point of being nasty, to the point of stealing bananas from juveniles. So in the monkey world, no one gives you a banana. After breast milk, you don't get food unless you get it yourself. And when you reach for a banana, a bigger, stronger monkey will grab it from you. And if you persist, they'll bite your arm. So biting is pain, and pain builds huge neural pathways that say, whoa, I don't want to get bitten again, so I'm not going to reach for that banana. So you look for a banana, you look for another banana that's not closer to a bigger individual. So may take some hard work to find that banana, but every little monkey figures it out. And every little human should be figuring it out. So you should be learning. And when a little monkey finds their own banana, their brain rewards them with dopamine. That's the good feeling that says, wow, I met a need. And the next time you see a way like, oh, look, there's a banana in the distance. I'm going to climb for it. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of effort, but I'm going to relieve my hunger when I get it. And that builds a dopamine pathway. And soon every little monkey knows how to meet their survival needs. But gradually, a monkey gets big enough and strong enough to say, I don't have to go for that distant banana. I'm strong enough to get this banana right here, and nobody's going to dare bite me. And this is the BS that we have in our daily lives that frustrates us. And this is what mammals do. And that's a whole separate chemical, which is serotonin. And that's all explained in my book. And that's really why people end up drinking and have other bad habits, because your brain is constantly comparing your strength to others. And it's always seeing your weaknesses and other people's strengths. And when you put yourself in the one down position, you deprive yourself of serotonin, you trigger stress chemicals, and you feel like your life is threatened, even if you have plenty of bananas and your belly is full. So this is the thought habit that we need to really understand, and all of my books explain
it. And so is that linked as well to people going out of their comfort zone in order to feel
Yes.
good?
Yes. So your comfort zone is the same as the neural pathways that were developed when you were young. And the reason those neural pathways are so important is because of a chemical called myelin. So myelin coats neurons the way a wire gets coated by plastic. And an insulated wire is 100 times more efficient at conducting electricity. And a myelinated neuron is 100 times more efficient at conducting electricity. And that's why your brain automatically goes to those neurons that you myelinated when you were young. Sometimes it's called your autopilot. And many people tell you don't run on automatic, but you really have to run on automatic. So the simple example is when I'm driving a car, I can do other things while I'm driving a car, like let's say I have a conversation or listen to the radio. But then there's a point where, it's too much, and then I get into an accident. But to some extent, I can drive while I'm talking because I'm driving on autopilot. So our brain is designed to go on autopilot, and your emotions and your self-soothing and meeting your needs and seeking happy chemicals, you're doing it all on autopilot, but you have a little bit of extra bandwidth, like the person who's talking while they're driving. You have a little bit of extra bandwidth to do something more. And you can use that extra bandwidth to steer away from your autopilot. But if you're already wasting your extra bandwidth with alcohol that lowers your capacity, or
Mhm.
with negative expectations, or with being angry all the time, then you don't have the extra bandwidth to use on something positive.
Wow, I can resonate with that, especially when you're tired out and you've just been drinking and you just have no energy. You have no oomph to do anything out of your comfort zone. So you don't
Yes,
ever feel
yes,
that feeling, do you?
yes,
So
yes,
yeah, and I think in the early days for people who are drinking every day, this is all going to seem like it's so far away for them. But I suppose it's just getting started, isn't it? Any advice for how to just get started? I mean,
yes. So,
we're trying to inspire other people by, telling people about how successful and how good alcohol-free life feels for us. And sometimes it's a worry that, they see that and they seem like they're so far away from that,
yeah.
that they're going to just click off and say, I'm too far from that. Yeah.
So let's talk a little about boundaries. Like a person who's drinking, they may have gotten the feeling that I'm never going to have any extra energy anyway because my family takes it all out of me, or my workplace takes it all out of me, or society takes it all out of me. So once you have created these negative expectations in your mind, then you feel that I can never feel good, therefore I have no alternatives but to drink. So the two belief systems go together. It's like drinking is your reward for having such a crappy life. So then you keep reinforcing the belief that you have a crappy life in order to get the reward. So,
Yeah.
but then once you think about stopping drinking, then you're like, oh my God, now I have to look at my crappy life. So the idea that, well, I've created this crappy life by telling myself that I'm not allowed to have any joy for myself, any space for myself, because anything I have, I must give it away to anyone who asks, which is not true. You are allowed to have something for yourself. You're allowed to have peace and time and energy for yourself. So start with some little bit of that that's meaningful to you and say, this first, you could say, and I'm just listening to this book about doing things in small steps. So let's say, theoretically, a person says, here's a glass of wine. I'm going to pour out half of it. And instead, I'm going to reward myself with 10 minutes of doing this other thing that I wanted to do. That's
Yes, it's like a
something healthy.
gradual. Mm-hmm.
Something healthy for you, but let's say 10 minutes of time away from the thing that distresses you to do something that you usually don't give yourself time to do, but something that's healthy. And like, I'll just give you an example. I call myself a travel addict. I love to travel. So if I spend 10 minutes reading TripAdvisor about the place I want to go to, it would just be an example of something that doesn't have harmful side effects that I reserve as a reward for myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it all really depends on the individual as to how far away they are from that. I mean, I think sometimes it's for them to recognize in themselves as well, isn't it? To, the ownership has to stay with them as to to how to get on that first rung of the ladder, because I don't really want to condone saying we'll just have half a glass of wine, because I think the problem with alcohol is, and I used to suffer with this, you would tell yourself you're going to have one glass, and as soon as you'd had that, you wanted more. So it's
So
a
how about
difficult
this?
one.
So here's another example. The guy with the book about small steps would say, set a timer for 1 minute. And every time you feel like having a drink, just wait that 1 minute. Oh, you know what
Hmm.
he did? He said, every time you feel like having a drink, write me an email that says, I'm about to have a drink, or leave me a voice message that says,
Yeah.
and just it introduced that act of consciousness. And
Yes, I
so,
think you said something last week about
yes,
standing up and spinning
yes,
around.
yes.
And I
So
just had
this,
this vision of everybody sat, just at the bus stop spinning around.
yes,
So
yes.
that takes off.
So this is my thing. So the moment you're about to indulge in your bad habit, just get up and spin around in a circle, and then you can have your glass of wine. So you will do it because you will spin in a circle because you want that glass of wine. But that physical action will create conscious awareness of that moment, because normally that moment passes so quickly that you don't notice. And I
Yeah.
developed this for people who are food addicts because the person said to me, by the time I realized what I was doing, I had already eaten half of the pizza. So
Right.
it's creating that moment of consciousness. And
Yes, I think that's useful as well, whether they take the drink or not, because often I'll say, well, there was 1 minute you weren't drinking and the next minute you were. What led you to that? And often they can't tell me. They can't say, oh, and I'll say, were you upset? Was it a feeling you were wanting to create or a feeling you were wanting to escape from? What was it? And they
yeah,
can
yeah,
never really
yes,
pinpoint
yes,
that. So
yes.
that would be useful.
Yeah. So a positive way of looking at that, because, if I agree, most people can't identify that moment. And if you ask them to dig for that bad feeling, it's sort of yucky. So a positive way of thinking about it is to say, in that moment, I wanted to feel good and I didn't know other ways to feel good.
Hmm.
So once a person, and that's what my book Tame Your Anxiety is about, like
Wow, that
feeling.
simplifies the whole thing, really. That is exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to show people other ways to feel good.
Yes. In
That should
that
be
moment, in that
my
split second. Exactly.
hmm.
Yeah. It's learned, but the urge to feel good is natural and normal and healthy and universal. Our brain evolved to seek good feelings, and we seek them in the ways we've learned before. So, for example, a monkey is not born knowing what to eat. The bigger your brain is, the less you're hardwired at birth. So, you're born to learn what will make you feel good. So a monkey learns that it will feel good if it climbs after this or that plant. And it learns that if you eat fruit that's not ripe, it feels bad. But if you eat ripe fruit, it feels good. So, in the same way, we learn when to expect a good feeling and when to expect a bad feeling. And it's just a neural pathway, but we don't know that because effortlessly flowing down our existing pathways is just how we live. But once you realize that that's what you're doing, you have the power to build new pathways to say, there are other ways to feel good, and I can give them to myself.
Wow. Hmm. And it's just trying lots of things because I suppose something that I suggest might not
Right.
tick the box for them. So it's about
Exactly.
trying and trying. And I think that's what the still the stage I'm at. I'm trying all sorts of different things, and it's just being open minded and spending time with positive people. I think that's key as well.
Yes. Yes. Although I have to say, when I was young, frankly, I did not enjoy partying at all. And I felt like something was wrong with me and I should enjoy it. And actually felt like shame and guilt about not. So it's just important to be open-minded about, like, on some deep level, we get wired, and sometimes, we're not going to change the deepest level. So it's better to sort of add new leaves to our neural tree rather than expect that you're going to build a new trunk in adulthood. So
Hmm.
in my case, instead of deciding, like, what's wrong with me, I have to find another way to enjoy a party, is like, I need another way to feel good around people.
Hmm. And so was that kind of just your personality, do you think? Were you more introvert? You didn't like to be in a crowd of people, or because sometimes I think people drink for that reason. They
Exactly.
drink because they've got the social anxiety and they're expected to go to the party.
Exactly.
So that's what they do. And
Exactly.
you know.
Well, I grew up around a lot of negativity. So I
Hmm.
had nothing but negative expectations about people. And last week you told me more about your situation, which was exactly the opposite from mine.
Oh yeah.
So it's very funny. And then my husband's situation is sort of exactly in the middle of the two of us. So it's
Hmm.
just fascinating how diverse ways of growing up there are. So in my case, I always got negative feedback at home, and my parents were also unhappy, so I got negative from them. In your case, you got positivity, but it was lubricated by alcohol. So
Hmm.
in my husband's case, it's funny, it's like his parents were like, um, they were very severe and critical. And then they would have these parties and they would get drunk and all their friends would get drunk. And my husband would look at them. And it was like such a violation of these
Why?
very harsh
Oh.
standards that he was held to all week. So he was like, ew, why would I want to do that? You know?
Right.
So, yeah, so yeah, all different ways. And then in my home, there was negativity, but there was obsession with food. So everyone has their own self-soothing strategies. And in my mother's case, like she was focused on food. So if I didn't want to eat what she gave me, she was very like she would be offended.
Oh.
So there was like pressure to eat what she ate. So I totally understand that pressure. So each of us can go back to those early circuits and to say, you know what? It was just a circuit that got built by accident. And I
Hmm.
have billions of other neurons to build new circuits with.
Yes, and I think on top of that, I don't know what it's like. Where are you from? Where are you based?
New York.
Actually,
Oh, well, I'm based in California, but I grew up in New York.
wow. Because where we are, it's just so normal to drink. It's just normal behavior. Every occasion, there's alcohol. Children's birthday parties, baby showers,
Huh.
um, bank holidays. In the supermarket, it's there on special offer. So it's everywhere. It's so hard. You are actually unusual if you don't drink. That people would presume you're ill or there's something wrong if you don't drink. So I think even if someone makes the decision themselves and they want to go through all this process and they're happy to look back at, how they were brought up and they learn behavior, it's so hard because it's everywhere.
Well, I have to tell you, here in California, there are people in that alcohol world that would say the same thing. And then there are other people, like my husband and I, who are, it's just not part of our lives. And so, nor is binge eating. So I think to some extent, people create those networks. And then
Yeah,
I understand that it may be the culture, but it may
yeah,
also be a subset of networks
yeah.
that
I
are
think you're right.
parallel lives.
Yes, I think you do tend to gravitate towards people who drink on a similar level to you. So it seems normal the amount you drink in. But what I'm talking about is, like I suppose it's just in shops and advertised, and you could go to the chemist shop to buy shampoo and there's wine in the chemist shop, and
Okay.
it just seems, I feel really hardly sorry for people who are medically, they can't drink, they've got like, a problem, and how do they avoid it? It's impossible
Okay,
to avoid.
so here's another way of looking at that. When I was in college, I was trained in this worldview that everything that goes wrong in your life, it's the fault of the system, and it's the fault of capitalism, and it's the fault of companies seeking profits. And I learned this automatic habit of blaming companies, profit making companies, for all of my woes. And I learned that if I repeat this idea that I will get a good grade. And so that becomes a very deep thought habit, especially for the students who didn't do the reading and just learned to repeat that blame capitalism. And they have no other skill because they didn't do the reading, but I did the reading. So I have to tell you that where I live in California, so marijuana has become legalized and is everywhere. So like 5, 10 years ago, it was not everywhere. And now people said, oh, it's so unfair that marijuana isn't easily available. It's so unfair that people don't have this very useful herb. And so now everywhere you go, the marijuana is in your face because it was considered this great injustice that we were being deprived from marijuana. And now, you know, a lot of people are losing their clarity, I would say, and building a very deep automatic pilot to not take responsibility for creating healthy, reward-seeking emotions, but just going on automatic pilot to that. And so in a few years from now, they'll be able to blame so 1 year, you're blaming the system for not having it available. The next year, you're blaming the system for pushing it on you. So the problem is blaming the system and not taking responsibility for your own thought
You're right, because I sometimes do say now that for me, alcohol, it's kind of like if I was at a buffet and there was olives. I'm not interested in olives. I wouldn't eat the olives. I probably wouldn't notice the olives. So it's about getting to that stage. I can't say ban olives, can I? Like, look at all the olives that they're bloody everywhere. So I think
Exactly.
it's just until you
Exactly.
kind of get that brainwashing out of your own head
Yes.
and then it's
Yes.
insignificant. And I think, I mean, I'm
Yes.
nearly 1 year and I do feel that I wouldn't thank you for a glass of wine. There's nothing, I don't see any benefit it would bring, but it still makes me cross that
Yes.
it's everywhere.
Yes, yes, yes. And part of this thought loop is I can't stop until our society gets better. I can't get better until our society gets better. I hear this all the time, and I'm in the middle of writing this big protest against this. The whole idea that it's society's fault, and as an individual, I'm powerless, and society has to get better, it's just an excuse to not take action. And when you give up your power to take action over your own life and your own brain, you give your power to the person saying, join me to fight society. It's good for them. It meets their
Hmm.
needs, just doesn't meet your needs.
Yeah. Yes, I suppose it's just a different way of thinking about it. And you do get caught into the trap of repeating what you've heard. And then, like you say, it's stopping and thinking, well, actually, it's there. It doesn't mean you have to pick it up and take it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the reason you would pick up and take it is you have the expectation that it's going to feel good. And you have succeeded in building the expectation that it's going to feel bad eventually. And the difference is, so this is important. We have a long-term brain and a short-term brain. Okay. So our short-term brain is in the center and our long-term brain is on top of it. The center part of your brain is exactly the same as a monkey's brain. And then the part that makes you human is the ability to anticipate the future. So you're saying to yourself, it may feel good now, but it's going to feel bad later. And you're
Hmm.
giving that weight to it's not worth feeling bad
No.
later.
And it's not worth, for me, it's not worth giving up feeling good all week because I got to the point where the only time I felt good was when I had a drink because I was so running on empty. And so for me, I'm trading a couple of hours feeling good for now this way I feel good all week, you know?
Exactly,
So
exactly.
so
So
yeah. And I
people
think
can
people,
really learn from how did you connected your long-term brain to your short-term brain, because other people, they know that they're going to feel bad, but they don't know it in that instant when they're about to take the drink. So how did you
no.
learn that?
I didn't know that either. I didn't know that at all until probably researching about it and reading about it. Have you heard of Annie Grace?
No, write that down.
Yeah. Annie Grace, she's an American, and she her book is all about the neural pathways and about an awareness, working out your awareness, and then clarity, and then turnaround. She calls it ACT. So your awareness is, I want that wine because I'm going to have a good time. And then the clarity is actually questioning and saying, will you really have a good time? Play it forward, and then turn it around and saying, well, actually, I can have a good time without the wine. So you kind of, it loses its power because you don't rely on the wine for you before you do this process, you think of it as this magic substance going to take away all your troubles. It's going to make you have a fantastic time. But actually, when you really look at it, that's not at all what it does. It makes everything more complicated, and you feel. I was just filled with anxiety. And I think she explained, you might can put a bit better spin on this. Something about the alcohol is a depressant, and your brain um, overcompensates by stimulating your brain to override that depressant, which is why the next day you feel anxious.
Oh,
Does that make sense?
totally makes sense. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And that's really like every drug of abuse. You're borrowing from tomorrow's energy.
yeah.
And it's not just drugs of abuse, but people who are workaholic or exercise addicts. They're really robbing tomorrow's energy budget in order to feel good now because they're so fearful of that moment when your happy chemical is gone and now what? And I've learned to call that moment neutral. So it's not
Yes.
that I'm down, but I'm in neutral. And neutral is a good thing because that says, okay, my decks are cleared, and now I get to choose the next thing. Just like a monkey found the banana, he stopped for a rest while he was eating and digesting, and now he's looking for another reward. And so he looks around, and that's saying, okay, my last way to feel happy is over. What's the next way? And my favorite example is, let's say I have an ice cream, and it's like, I love ice cream. It's like, oh, wow, this is great. There's going to be an instant when I have the last lick, and then I have to face the world without ice cream,
Oh.
you know? And so it's inevitable. So you can't be eating ice cream every minute of your life. So accepting and knowing that there are many ways to feel good is our power.
Yeah. And I think some people could take from what you've just said there that, okay, so I'll just drink moderately, which is fine. But I do believe if you're drinking too much, too often, it's harder to go from that to drinking moderately. It would be easier to break that spell with the 45 days or whatever we suggest, and then go back if that's what you choose to do. If you then choose to go back to drink moderately, because I think it's hard to, when you're in the system of drinking, I don't know, a bottle of wine a night, to go to just have one glass on a weekend. That, I think there needs to be the break. Would you agree?
Well, the break gives you the time to build new ways of feeling good, because when you have that moment to know, oh, there are other ways to feel good that come to me that are part of who I am.
I love that, other ways to feel good. I'm going to use that.
Good.
Yes,
And
I like.
again, when I say other ways to feel good, I don't mean that you have to give money to beggars. This is
No.
always the cliche that we need a broader repertoire. And the source of feeling good in the animal brain is meeting your own needs in small steps. And part
Hmm.
of meeting your own needs is building mutual social alliances with others. So helping others is good, getting along with others is good, but it's important to know that your brain rewards you for meeting your own needs.
Mm. Hmm.
So
Hmm.
It was such a pleasure talking to you, and
Yes,
this
thank
is
you.
great. I really enjoyed it. It's very useful, and I'm happy to hear people's questions.
Wow, right, okay. Well, I'm going to use this video. I'm going to give them a treat because it's been a long one, but I'm going to put it on the page and get some feedback and see what comes back from it, and then hopefully we'll be able to hook up and do it again now that we're all.
Great. Yes. Now
Yeah.
that we got it. Okay, great. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
It was great to have you with us today. We hope you'll keep learning about your inner mammal and keep checking out the resources of innermammalinstitute.org. We have books, videos, blogs, and graphics that will help you build power over your mammal brain. Help us spread the word by reviewing and subscribing to our podcast and checking out our books and videos. And do join us live on Sundays so you can ask your questions about rewiring your happy brain chemicals. Details at innermammalinstitute.org/podcast.